the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God.
All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Every one of us. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, subscribers, and anybody else who happens to stumble upon this message, Beit Torah, Yochoved. As always, we welcome our subscribers. They're the family. I don't know who you all are, but your family, okay? So, we are pioneering a whole new horizon here today. I can't print out my message, so I got to use the computer. Oy vey. Boy, do I need help. I don't know, I'm not wired for this. So, the Parasha today is Shemot. We begin Shemot, which means names. And I'm going to do something very different. I want to just briefly cover the events in the history somewhat leading up to where Moshe encounters Yehovah. Think about your own life when you first encountered Yehovah. Think about the dialogue you had. What I want to do today, I don't have per se any, deep teaching, Hebrew words and meanings and, connections throughout certain scriptures of some sorts. But what I just want to do today is I extracted from the Parasha the dialogue between Moshe and Yehovah. And I'm going to try and replicate that dialogue. And what I want you to do is to just ask the Lord to kind of awaken your sensibilities to the personalness of God, Yehovah, and how He dialogues with you, and how He's dialoguing with Moshe, and how real and personal it is. And ask God to really enlighten you in the depth of His just genuineness with His creation and His creation of a human being, a humankind. Because this is an example for all of us. And so we review the 12 tribes basically who came into Egypt with Yaakov: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yissachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In all, there were 70 descendants of Yaakov. And Yosef was already in Egypt. Yosef died, as did his brothers and all that generation. In last Parsha, we covered where Jacob, Yaakov, gathered himself up and he went to sleep. He died. And now we see that Yosef died. And we're now in Mitzrayim, Egypt, where a group of 70 that came down into Egypt is beginning to multiply. Because it says here in verse 6, Yosef died, as did all his brothers and all that generation. The descendants of Isra'el, which Yaakov's name was also Isra'el, which we all know means to wrestle with God. But it says that the descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew very powerful, and the land became filled with them. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit here because there's something very apparent here about what we read in Bereshit, in Genesis, many parshas ago. We're seeing the basic outline of the first mitzvot, where God said, be fruitful and multiply. And here we are, what? From creation to where we are now, it's about the year 1400 right now. Not quite, 1200. Okay? And that means there's, from creation, started in 4000, and we're down to 12 or 1400 BC. Quite a few years. But the descendants of Yaakov were fruitful. They increased abundantly, they multiplied and grew very powerful, and the land became filled with him. So when we go back to Bereshit 1, verse 8, Yehovah, God, planted a garden toward the east in Eden. There he put the person whom he had formed. Now, take notice. It says he planted a garden toward the east in Eden. Did you ever plant a garden? What happens when you plant a garden? Get your envelope of seeds and you plant a garden, right? But God planted the garden, but there's nobody there to take care of it. He did the first thing. He planted the seed. But it wasn't until there he put the person whom he had formed. So you have the seed, the person he formed, and then in verse 9, it says, out of the ground, Yehovah God caused to grow every tree pleasing in appearance and good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God planted the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Very interesting. Now, if you're part of our mitzvot study, as we're going through, forever how long it takes, years, 613 mitzvot, we're going to go through them. It says, Adonai, God, took the person and put him in the garden, verse 15, to cultivate and care for it. Then Adonai, God said, gave the person an order. You may freely eat from every tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You are not to eat from it, because on the day that you eat from it, it will become certain that you will die. And so, my point here is that God did his part, and in order for the garden to flourish, it wasn't until God put man in the garden, as it says in verse 15, to cultivate and care for it. Guess what? Things didn't start producing, flourishing, till man did his part. What a principle in our own lives. God is involved in our lives. But God help us to recognize when he's done his part, when he's planted the seeds in our lives for the things that he has for us, that we recognize that our part now is to cultivate it and to take care of it. Very interesting. So we see that in the beginning of Shemot 1, the narrative is pointing out that the descendants of Israel were fruitful, they increased abundantly and multiplied and grew very powerful. It's apparent that we go from Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov to the 12, that God, through Yosef, brought them, led them, planted the seeds for their sustenance and their, for generation. God's doing his part. And they are flourishing and multiplying. Now we come to where things begin to change. And I guess what I want us to see here is how God's doing his part and Israel has to do theirs. Yehovah is doing his part and Moshe has to do his part in order to unite with Yehovah to accomplish his purposes. And so we see the word fruitful, which is hara, which means to bear fruit, to be fruitful, to increase. In ancient Israelite culture, fruitfulness was a significant concept, both agriculturally and in terms of family lineage. The ability to bear children was seen as a blessing from Yehovah, and agricultural abundance was a sign of divine favor. The idea of fruitfulness is deeply embedded in the covenantal promises given to the patriarchs, where God promises to make them fruitful and multiply their descendants. The word to multiply or abound in Hebrew is sharatz, which means to swarm or teem or abound. It's primarily conveys the idea of swarming or teeming, a prolific, abundant movement of creatures, particularly small animals in aquatic life. It depicts the natural world's capacity for life and growth, reflecting God's creative power and the abundance of his creation. In the ancient Near Eastern context, the concept of swarming or teeming was closely associated with fertility and the life-giving aspects of nature. The abundance of creatures in bodies of water is seen as a divine blessing of sustaining power of the Creator. So it's an overwhelming presence or movement of people or armies. So we see that the descendants of Yaakov after the 12 brothers and their ongoing descendants, they were flourishing in Egypt. They were teeming, they were swarming, they were multiplying and abounding. And then it says they became mighty, powerful, numerous. Awesome, to be strong, mighty, numerous, or powerful. So they've kind of reached the pinnacle of their development, wouldn't you say? Now, the time of Yosef was somewhere between 2000 and 1600 BC. The time of Moshe, was 1350 to 1250. And so, if we go back to Yosef, it says, there arose a new king over Egypt, and he knew nothing about Yosef. And I want us to see that Yosef was 1600 BC, and Moses was 1350 to 1250 as it descends. It's around a 600 to 750 year gap. Now let me ask you a question. Just to kind of relate to that, can you tell me what happened about 750 years ago right now? Do you remember? Who was in power? Who made incredible impressions on the culture? I can think of some here and there. We're a little bit more advanced and information is a bit more broad spread. But the point is that the new king knew nothing about Yosef. And consequently, as a result, knew nothing about the Israelites and more or less where they came from, and that at one time the prime minister of Egypt is where they were all related to. But he recognized that they became too numerous and powerful, and that as a result they needed to use wisdom in how they deal with them. If we don't, they'll continuously multiply, and in the event that we have any wars, they might ally themselves with our enemies. They feared that. So this is where the whole slave thing comes into play. It says they put slave masters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. They basically enslaved them. And bear in mind, Egypt had two ruling monarchies in a sense, and there was always a tension there between the north and the south, and there was threats always to overthrow one kingdom or another within Egypt. And so it says that they put slave masters over the Israelites, and they built the storage cities of Pithom and Ramses. The Egyptians oppressed them, but yet the Israelites continued to multiply and expand. However, the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and worked them relentlessly. That's what you do with slaves, right? You work them relentlessly, making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work. And in all this toil, they were shown no mercy. Sounds like a slave to me. So we have that dilemma evolving within Egypt. But the Israelites continued to multiply and flourish and become powerful. Now the king of Egypt recognized this, and as a result, he says, we got to do something in order to hold back these people from flourishing, and there's a threat there. And so the king spoke to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, who attended Hebrew women giving birth. And the Pharaoh instituted a rule for the midwives that in their participating in the birthing process, if it was a boy, they were to kill him. If it was a girl, let her live. Looks like they had, what do they call that today? They want to kill babies after they're born. There's nothing new under the sun, is there? They were doing it 4,000 years ago. And we're supposed to be civilized? I don't know. There's something missing in that civilized context, that civilized definition. And so the midwives, however, were God-fearing women. And they didn't do as the king of Egypt ordered them. They let the boys live. And so the king of Egypt called them on the carpet and said, why have you done this and let the boys live? Their response was, well, the Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. The Hebrew women go into labor and give birth before the midwives even arrive. So God prospered the midwives, and the people continued to multiply and grow very powerful. The midwives feared God, and He made them founders of families. Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every boy that is born, throw in the river, let all the girls live. Now, Amram and Yochoved were a married couple, and they had a son and a daughter. I believe the son was Aaron, and I believe the daughter had to be Miriam. But Amram and Yochoved conceived and had a son. She hid him for 3 months, and when she could no longer hide him, she took a papyrus basket, coated it with clay and tar, and put the child in it, and placed it among the reeds on the riverbank. Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, came out to bathe in the river. But the sister of this male child, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Spotting the basket among the reeds, Bithiah sent her slave girl to get the basket. She opened it, and in front of her eyes was a crying baby boy. Moved with pity, she said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." And that boy's sister, I believe Miriam, said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find you one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter answered and said, "Yes, go." Now how profound is that? How supernatural. The hand of God was determined to guide Moses as a 3-month-old baby in the water of the Nile to float down at the time that Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, just happened to be out there bathing. And she came upon him. She saw him. Coincidence? There are no coincidences. Timing? God's timing. Try to look at your own life in this respect. God made a way. God has, or is, or will make a way for you in whatever comes your way, whatever comes our way. Why? This is God. He's revealed himself as Emmanuel, God who's with us. So the woman, the young lady, took the child and nursed it. And when the child had grown some, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she began to raise him as her son. Now, I don't have it in my notes, but I just know it from having read it. If you go to Acts 7, verse 20, and read a couple verses there, I find some interesting key points about Moses. It says, he was trained in the wisdom of Egypt. Really important. What is the wisdom of Egypt? You remember Yosef? When his cup was taken? This was 1 or 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Parasha. He accused Benjamin, "What did you take my cup, my wine cup for? I use it for divination." What knowledge was revealed there? What wisdom of Egypt is there in such a degree that God, even in the Torah and in the Gospels and epistles? Interesting. And Egypt holds a special place in God's heart. And if you read the prophets, you'll discover that. And so Moshe is nurtured and groomed in the house of Pharaoh. And now he begins to integrate into the culture and the position he happens to have. as a adopted son of Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh. She gave him a name. She called him Moshe, which means pulled out, because I pulled him out of the water. Moshe was a grown man. When he was a grown man, he went out to visit his kinsmen. So we know that he knew that he was one of the Hebrews. It says it right there. He went out to visit his kinsmen. It says he watched them struggling at forced labor, and he saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. And so Moshe responded, and he killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. Big mistake. Big mistake for anybody. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrew men fighting, and he confronted them, says, why are you hitting your companion, your kinsman? Who appointed you ruler and judge over us? They responded. Do you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian? Wow, can you imagine that? Somebody trying to do something good so that people don't get hurt, and they say, what, are you going to kill me too? And with that, Moshe became frightened and thought that the matter has become known, and he fled. When Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to have Moshe put to death, but Moshe fled to the land of Midian. Now, if you know where Midian is, you have the Sinai Peninsula, you have the Sea of Suf, and then you have Midian. So, kind of interesting. From Ramses, Moshe had to travel down through a rocky area and get to the beach of what today is called Moab. And interesting how God prepared him for the Exodus by him fleeing because he feared. And he crossed over. I'm sure there was a way to get across. Didn't part the sea yet. That came later. But he got across into Midian. And one day as he was sitting by a well, the daughters of the priests of Midian came. Now, we see more about the priest of Midian, which was Jethro. And Jethro advised, he was an advisor to Pharaoh. That's pretty much historically documented in the writings. And so one day as Moshe was sitting by a well, the daughters of Jethro came and filled the troughs to water their father's sheep. It's kind of interesting. That's twice now that the women were tending to the sheep. You remember Rachel? When she came to Jacob, she was tending her father's sheep. Very key person. And now we see here the daughters of Jethro, which one of them was Zipporah, which became Moshe's wife. She was tending her father's sheep. Unfortunately, those shepherds came and tried to drive the daughters away. And Moshe got up and defended them, and I guess he scared them away. Says he was a very strong man. And Moshe got up and defended them, and then he watered their sheep. And the daughters returned back to home or their tent or their whatever. And the father said, Jethro said, how come you're back so soon today? And they said, well, there was an Egyptian that rescued us from the shepherds who drew water for us, and he watered the sheep. And the father's first response, not having any sons, having all daughters, out in the middle of nowhere, wondered, okay, where is that man? And he says, where is he? Invite him to have something to eat. I want to meet the guy. Moshe was glad to stay on with the man, and he gave Moshe his daughter Zipporah in marriage. And as we know, she gave birth to a son named Gershom. And during those years, the king of Egypt died. That was set on killing Moshe for killing that Egyptian. So the nation of Israel, still under slavery, groaned under the yoke of slavery and cried out. And their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, Yehovah. Yehovah heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Yehovah saw the people of Israel. God acknowledged them. Now we see another quality about God. God acknowledged them. Do you feel when you had your first encounter with God, were you seeking after him? Or did he acknowledge you? Did you cry out in your turmoil and struggle where you were, or even now in your life? Cry out. He acknowledged you. And even now, he will acknowledge you if you cry out to him. These are life lessons. This is seeing God in real time and circumstances. And because we have moments where he just doesn't seem to be there, doesn't mean he's not there. Maybe he's waiting for you to cry out. I can attest to that in my own life. I've been situations and moments where I cried out. And I can honestly say God responded. So now what I want to do is I want to focus in on Moses, on Moshe. And I want to focus in on the dialogue between Yehovah and Moshe. Moshe was tending the sheep of Yitro, his father-in-law, and he was leading the flock to the far side of the desert. Isn't it interesting? God always finds us when we wander around to the far side of life, where we shouldn't be, or where we happen, the circumstances take us, the circumstances in life take us there, whatever that may be, homelessness, turmoil, family problems. I could go on and on. We could think of many health issues. It's interesting because It was on the far side of the mountain. I wonder how those astronauts were on the far side of the moon. I never know. They read some scripture. So, but on the far side of the desert, Moshe came to the mountain of God, which was Horeb. And the angel of Yehovah appeared to him in a fire blazing from the middle of the bush. Not from the side of the bush or the bottom of the bush, from the middle of the bush. Moshe looked and saw that although the bush was flaming with fire, the bush was not being burned up. And he said, he thought to himself, it says he said, Moshe said, I wonder if he spoke out loud to himself. There's fire in that bush. It's not burning. There's no smoke. Where there's fire, there's smoke. But in this one, there was fire, but there was no smoke. Doesn't say there was any smoke. Moshe said, I'm going over to see this amazing sight. Something he had never seen before. Perhaps God will reveal to you something you've never seen before. Experience something you've never seen before or experienced. For what? For what reason? To reveal himself to you. Where are you? Are you on that far side of the desert in life? Cry out to God. Cry out to Yehovah. And you'll see something amazing when he responds to you. Which he will. You just gotta believe. Just gotta believe. Abraham believed. He didn't do some great thing. God said, because you believed, I counted that for righteousness concerning you. And so, I begin the dialogue here. I'm going to do my best. Just bear with me. This is something new. I just was moved to do this because I really wanted, besides getting all the details of everything going on, I really wanted to just look at the dialogue. And so I'm going to point out when Yehovah's speaking and when Moshe responds or speaks. So, God called to Moshe from the middle of the bush. Moshe! Moshe! And Moshe responded, Hinene, Hinene, here I am. Don't come any closer. Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov. It says Moshe covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Bear in your thoughts as we move into Shemot. In instant Moshe was afraid. But as God reveals himself to him, and Moshe gets to know Yehovah, he's not afraid. I say to you, when you cry out to God, there's no need to be afraid when he reveals himself to you. Jehovah responds, I have seen how my people are being oppressed in Egypt. And heard their cry for release from their slave masters. Because I know their pain, I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that country to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amori, the Prizzi, the Hivi, and the Yevusi. Yes, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen how terribly the Egyptians oppressed them. Therefore, now come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you can lead my people, the descendants of Israel, out of Egypt. Moshe responds, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the people out of Egypt? Jehovah says, I will surely be with you. Your sign that I have sent you will be that when you have led the people out of Egypt, you will worship Yehovah on this mountain. Moshe says, look, when I appear before the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What am I to tell them? Jehovah says, Eye, Asher, Eye, I am, will be, what I am, will be. Here is what to say to the people of Israel. Eye, I am, or I will be, sent to you. Say this to the people of Israel. Yochoved Bithiah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered generation after generation. And I pause because they do now know what the vows are and the name by which God wishes to be addressed by his people, Israel. And that is Yehovah. Go, gather the leaders of Israel together and say to them, Yehovah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, has appeared to me and said, I have been paying close attention to you and have seen what it is that is being done to you in Egypt. And I have said that I will lead you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of Canaan, the Hittite, the Amori, the Prizzi, the Hivi, and the Yevusi, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will heed what you say. Then you will come, you and the leaders of Israel, before the king of Egypt. And you will tell him, Yehovah, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please, let us go 3 days' journey into the desert, so that we can sacrifice to Yehovah our God. I know that the king of Egypt will not let you leave unless he is forced to do so. And I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will do there. After that, he will let you go. Moreover, I will make the Egyptians so well disposed towards this people that when you go, you won't go empty-handed. Rather, all the women will ask their neighbors and house guests for silver and gold jewelry and clothing, with which you will dress your own sons and daughters. In this way, you will plunder the Egyptians. Moshe responds, but I'm certain they won't believe me. And they won't listen to what I say, because they'll say, Yehovah did not appear to you. And Yehovah responds, what is that in your hand? A staff. Throw it on the ground. Put your hand out and take it by the tail. This is so that they will believe that Yehovah, the God of their fathers, the God of Avram, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov, has appeared to you. Now, Moshe, put your hand inside your coat. Pulled it out. It's filled with leprosy. Now, Moshe, put your hand back in your coat. And it was restored. If they won't believe you or heed the evidence of the first sign, they will be convinced by the second. But if they aren't persuaded even by both these signs and still won't listen to what you say, then take some water from the river, pour it on the ground. The water you take from the river will turn into blood on the dry land. It's interesting because Moshe responds. He kind of changes the subject. He says, oh, Yehovah, I'm a terrible speaker. I always have been. And I'm no better now, even after you've spoken to your servant. My words come slowly. My tongue moves slowly. Jehovah responds, Moshe, who gives a person a mouth? Who makes a person dumb or deaf, keen-sighted or blind? Isn't it I, Yehovah? Now therefore go. I will be with your mouth and will teach you what to say. Moshe says, please, Lord, send someone else, anyone you want, but me. Yehovah responds, don't you have a brother, Aharon, the Levi? I know that he's a good speaker. In fact, here he is now, coming out to meet you, and he'll be happy to see you. You will speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his teaching you both what to do. I will be with your mouth and his teaching you both what to do. Thus, he will be your spokesman to the people. In effect, for you, he will be a mouth, and for him, you will be like God. Now take this staff in your hand, because you need it to perform the signs. Moshe responds, I beg you to let me go and return to my kinsmen in Egypt to see if they are still alive. He speaks to Yitro. And because Moshe had made an arrangement to be a help to Yitro and to tend his sheep. And so he humbly begs him to let him go and return to Egypt. And Yitro says, go in peace. Jehovah says then, go on back to Egypt, because all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moshe took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started out for Egypt. And then this is an interesting point here. If you look back in this dialogue, God tells Moshe to throw down his staff. Now, I would presume that Moshe had a staff. But as we go further on in the dialogue between Moshe and Yehovah, it's very clear. It says, Moshe took God's staff in his hand. So whose staff was it? Something to think about. Yehovah responds and says to Moshe, when you go back to Egypt, make sure that you do before Pharaoh every one of the wonders I have enabled you to do. Nevertheless, I'm going to make him hard-hearted, and he will refuse to let the people go. This is really important, because God is prophesying here. This was the angel of the Lord. Now, who's the angel of the Lord? He's carrying a staff that he gave to Moshe. And now he's prophesying and says, I'm going to make him hard-hearted, and he will refuse to let the people go. Then you are to tell Pharaoh, Yehovah says, Isra'el is my firstborn son. I have told you to let my son go in order to worship me, but you have refused to let him go. Well then, I will kill your firstborn son. Did you know God warned Pharaoh that he was going to kill his firstborn son for denying God's firstborn son freedom to come out 3 days into the desert and the people of Israel to come and worship their God? Pharaoh was warned. And so at the lodging place on the way, well, we know the incident where Moshe failed to circumcise Gershom, and Zipporah was pretty upset with that. So, but she circumcised him, not Moshe. It says a lot about Moshe, some of the things going on in his character and nature. And so Yehovah speaks to Aaron. He says, go into the desert to meet Moshe. He went, met him at the mountain of God, and kissed him. Moshe told him everything Jehovah had said in sending him, including all the signs he had ordered him to perform. And Moshe and Aaron went and gathered together all the leaders of the people of Israel. Aharon said everything Adonai had told Moshe, who then performed the signs for the people to see. The people believed. God said they would. Moshe obeyed, and they believed. When they heard that Jehovah had remembered the people of Israel and seen how they were oppressed, they bowed their heads and worshipped. Awesome. And then we see that where Moshe and Aaron together came and speak to Pharaoh. And they say, Pharaoh, here is what Jehovah, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they can celebrate a festival in the desert to honor me. Pharaoh responds and says, who's Jehovah that I should obey when he says to let Israel go? I don't know Jehovah, and I also won't let Israel go. And Moshe and Aaron respond, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert, so that we can sacrifice to Jehovah our God. Otherwise, he may strike us with a plague or with the sword. Pharaoh responds, Moshe and Aharon, what do you mean by taking the people away from their work? Get back to your labor. Look, the population of the land has grown, yet you are trying to have them stop working? That same day, Pharaoh ordered the slavemasters and the people's foremen, you are no longer to provide straw for the bricks of the people, for the bricks the people are making, as you did before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you will require them to produce the same quantity of bricks as before. Don't reduce it, because they're lazing around. This is why they're crying. Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Give these people harder work to do. That will keep them too busy to pay attention to speeches full of lies. Slave masters, here's what Pharaoh says. They speak to the slave masters. I will no longer give you straw. You go yourselves and get straw wherever you can find it. Speaking to the children of Israel. But your output is not to be reduced. The slave masters speaking to the children of Israel. I will no longer give you straw. You go yourselves and get straw wherever you can find it. But your output is not to be reduced. So the people were dispersed throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the slave masters kept pressing them. They said, keep working. Make your daily quota, just as when the straw was provided. The people of Israel, the foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave masters had appointed over them, were flogged and asked, why haven't you fulfilled your quota of bricks yesterday and today as you did formerly? So the foremen, representing the people of Israel, came and complained to Pharaoh. They said, why are you treating your servants this way? No straw is given to your servants, yet they keep telling us to make bricks, and now your servants are being flogged? The fault lies within your own people. Pharaoh responds and says, lazy. You're just lazy. That's why you say, let us go and sacrifice to Yehovah. Get going now and get back to work. No straw will be given to you, and you will still deliver the full amount of bricks. When they said, you are not to reduce your daily production quota of bricks, the foreman of the people of Israel could see that they were in deep trouble. As they were leaving Pharaoh, they encountered Moshe and Aharon standing by the road. Now just picture this. May Adonai look at you. They're speaking to Moshe and Aaron. May Adonai or Yehovah look at you and judge accordingly, because you have made us utterly abhorrent in the view of Pharaoh and his servants, and you've put a sword in their hands to kill us. Moshe returned to Yehovah, sought him, went before him, and said, Yehovah, why have you treated this people so terribly? What has been the value of sending me? For ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt terribly with this people. And you haven't rescued your people at all. Yehovah responds to Moshe. It says, now you will see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand, he will send them off. With force, he will drive them from the land. Does God care? Is God involved in their lives? Does God care about you, you watching? I'd say the character of God is He cares. Whatever our circumstances are, whatever our situation, whatever it is we yearn for and hope for, He's on it. He's right there. I used to see, and haven't for a while, a common phrase put on signboards about God. And it goes like this. If God is no longer around, guess who left? If God is no longer present in your life, guess who left? He is Emmanuel, God with us. He cares. He's intimately involved in your life, whether you realize it or not. And if you notice He's gone, you need to cry out. You need to reassess where you are and ask Him to bring you close to Him. your strength is diminished. For whatever the situation you find yourself in, ask Him to give you the strength to draw you close to Him. Cry out for Him. Yehovah! 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 I need you. Guarantee He will respond. In a burning bush, in a still small voice, He's the Lion of Judah, and He will take care of His people. He responded to Israel, and they were overwhelmed with the slavery and the harsh labor. He'll respond to you. Shalom. Thank you for listening. Read this. Ask God to reveal Himself to you in it. The dialogue between Him and Moshe is very revealing. Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Hear now, Jacob my servant. Hear now, O Israel. It was I who made you, formed you.